Sign it. Take the money.
And disappeared.
4.
You told me there was only one. You bought my silence. You didn't buy the truth.
The envelope was cream-colored, heavy stock, the kind of paper that costs money on purpose. Caroline Whitfield held it in both hands. She was sitting in a waiting room chair, the kind with armrests that are too high and cushions that are too thin. The kind you sit in when something important is about to happen to your body. The receptionist had handed it to her 10 minutes ago. A courier dropped this off for you, Mrs. Whitfield. She had looked at the envelope, at her name in Garrett's assistant's handwriting. Not Garrett's, his assistant's. Because Garrett didn't write things himself if he could have someone else write them. She had held it in her lap through the first 10 minutes of waiting. Then she opened it. Inside one page, heavy letterhead. Whitfield Technologies, LLC. The logo in gray at the top. The kind of gray that costs a graphic designer $3,000 to get exactly right. 3 paragraphs. She read the first one twice. It said that Garrett believed a voluntary dissolution of the marriage agreement would be in the best interest of all parties involved. All parties. She read the second paragraph. It said that Dana Pruitt, his executive assistant, was expecting his children, twins, that he hoped Caroline would understand this complicated the nature of their current situation. Complicated. She read the third paragraph. It said he had arranged a settlement, that he hoped she would find it more than generous, that he had always respected her deeply and hoped she would approach this with the maturity he knew she possessed. Maturity. Clipped to the letter, a check, made out to Caroline Ann Whitfield. She looked at the number, counted the commas, counted them again. $80 million. The waiting room smelled like lavender and recycled air. A toddler across the room was pulling magazines off a table one by one. His mother was on her phone, not watching. Caroline folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, put the check back inside. She put it in her purse. She checked her phone. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. No new messages from Garrett. The nurse appeared at the door. Young woman. Cheerful scrubs with little stars on them. Mrs. Whitfield? Caroline stood up. Her ankles were swollen. Her wedding ring was tight. She pressed one hand to the side of her belly, a habit she had developed in the last month. A reflex. Like checking that something precious was still there. She walked to the back. She sat on the paper-covered table. The paper crinkled under her. The sound was too loud in the small room. The doctor came in, stethoscope around her neck. The efficient warmth of someone who has learned to be kind quickly. "How are we feeling today?" she asked. "Good," Caroline said. "We're good." Her voice didn't shake. Inside her head, the actual thought, $80 million. He thinks this is a transaction. He thinks I'm a line item on a spreadsheet. He thinks he can fold me up and put me in an envelope just like he folded up that letter. The ultrasound began. Cold gel. The wand pressing. The image appearing on the screen. 2 heartbeats, strong, steady, side by side. But that wasn't all. The doctor tilted the screen slightly. "And here," she said quietly, "and here, 4 heartbeats." Caroline had known for 2 weeks. She had known and she had been deciding. She had been sitting with it the way you sit with a card you're not ready to play yet. She stared at the ceiling while the doctor confirmed what she already knew. 4. 2 sets of twins, 8 months along. All healthy. All his. All a secret she had been holding like a stone in her chest. "Everything looks excellent," the doctor said. "You're doing remarkably well for this stage." "Thank you," Caroline said. She got dressed. She scheduled the follow-up. She walked through the lobby, through the sliding glass doors, into the parking garage. She found her car, got in, put her purse on the passenger seat. She sat there. The engine was off. The garage smelled like exhaust and concrete. The fluorescent light above her hummed. She did not cry. She just sat, both hands on the steering wheel, looking at the concrete wall in front of her. 22 minutes. She counted later. Then she picked up her phone. She called Miles Hargrove. Miles was her attorney, not Garrett's. Hers. She had hired him 8 months ago, in the 4th month of her pregnancy, when some quiet alarm in the back of her mind had started ringing and would not stop. She had told herself she was being paranoid. She had told herself she was hormonal. She had told herself that Garrett was busy and distracted, and that successful men had distracted seasons, and that did not mean anything. She had still called Miles, just in case. That phone call had been the smartest thing she had done in 4 years of marriage. Miles answered on the second ring. "Caroline, I need to see you today," she said. "This afternoon, if possible." A brief pause. He had known her long enough to hear what wasn't in her voice. "I can move things around." 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock, she said. "And Miles?" "Yes? I received a settlement offer this morning. Another pause. Longer this time. I'll clear my afternoon, he said. She started the engine. She drove. The city moved around her. Cabs and delivery trucks and people crossing streets on their phones. The ordinary machinery of a Tuesday. None of it knowing that her world had just changed shape. She thought he planned this. The timing, the courier to the doctor's office. He wanted me to read it there. Vulnerable. Alone. Hormonal, he would say. He wanted me to feel small when I read it. She thought he miscalculated. Miles's office was on the 41st floor of a building downtown. Clean lines. Diplomas on the wall. A plant in the corner that was thriving, which always struck her as a good sign in a lawyer. He was waiting for her. He stood when she came in, poured a glass of water without asking, set it in front of her, sat down. She put the envelope on his desk. He read it without expression. The check made him pause, just slightly. A controlled pause, the kind that in another man might have been a sharp intake of breath. He put it down. He looked at her. "Do you want to accept?" he asked. "I want to know my options," she said. He walked her through them. Clean acceptance, contested divorce, modification of terms. The language of law is so organized, as if human suffering files neatly into labeled folders. She listened, and then she said something Miles had not expected. She said, "Before we go further, I need to tell you something about this morning's appointment." He waited. She said, "I'm not having one baby." He said, "I know. You told me weeks ago, twins." She shook her head. "Not two," she said. "4." The room went very quiet. "2 sets of twins," she said. "All confirmed healthy. All biologically his. I have the ultrasound report right here." Miles looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his pen. "He doesn't know," she said. "No, and he won't. Not yet." Miles set the pen down again, pressed his fingers together. "Caroline," he said carefully. The settlement offer he made $80 million as a lump sum was calculated with one child in mind. Possibly 2. Yes, if we're talking about 4 children. 4 children who are entitled to support calculated on his actual income over 18 years each. He slid a legal pad across the desk. $80 million is not enough. She looked at the number he'd written. She said, "He doesn't know what's coming." "No," Miles said. "He does not." She looked at her hand. At the ring on her finger, she twisted it, slowly. Then she slipped it off. She set it on his desk between them. She said, "Then let's make sure he can't stop it when it does." The first sign had been 2 years ago. The late nights. Not every night. Not dramatically. Just a little later. A dinner meeting here. A call from Tokyo there. She had believed him. She had been pregnant with Elliot, then their first. A singleton. A boy she had wanted so completely it frightened her. She had been tired and trusting, and she had thought, this is just what men like Garrett do in seasons like this. She had been wrong. She understood that now, sitting at her mother's kitchen table in Connecticut. Sylvia Crane's kitchen. The table where Caroline had done homework as a child. The same yellow walls. The same crack in the corner tile that had been there since 1990-something. Sylvia was in the next room, pretending not to listen. She was absolutely listening. Caroline held a mug of tea she hadn't touched. It had gone cold. Bitter, the way everything tasted lately. She was thinking about the signs. The second sign had been his phone. She was not a paranoid woman, had never been a snooper. But one night, reaching across the nightstand in the dark, she had picked up his phone by mistake. The screen had lit up in her hand a message. From a contact labeled simply DP. Running late. Wear the blue one. She had put the phone down. She had lain very still in the dark for a long time. She had told herself it was work. DP. Dana Pruitt. Of course it had been Dana Pruitt. She knew that now. She had known it then, in the way you know things you are not yet ready to know. The third sign had been the Christmas party. Whitfield Technologies' annual event. A ballroom in Midtown. 200 people. Open bar. The kind of party where everyone is performing slightly elevated versions of themselves. Dana Pruitt had been there. She was always there. She was Garrett's executive assistant. She was efficient and polished, and always slightly too warm on the phone when Caroline called the office. At the party, Caroline had been standing near the bar with a glass of sparkling water, 7 months pregnant with Elliot at the time, and she had looked across the room. Garrett was laughing at something. A real laugh. The kind that reached his eyes. The kind she used to be able to produce from him. Dana had her hand on his arm. A small thing. A casual thing. But the way he had looked at Dana in that moment, he hadn't looked at Caroline that way in over a year. She had turned back to her sparkling water. She had told herself, "You're being ridiculous. You're pregnant and tired, and you're reading things into nothing." She had not been ridiculous, and she had not been reading things into nothing. Layer 2 recognition pane. Miles's office was cold. She had been there for 90 minutes now, going through everything methodically, the way Miles operated. Dates, timelines, communications. He had asked her, when did you first suspect? She said 2 years ago, maybe longer, and you stayed. I stayed. He didn't ask why. That was one of the things she respected about him. He didn't ask why she had stayed. Because he knew why women stayed. Because staying was usually a decision made from inside a complicated architecture of love and investment and hope and fear. And people who asked why as if it had a simple answer had never lived inside that architecture. She said, I stayed because we had Elliot, because I thought we were building something, because I thought patient was the same as strong. She paused. It isn't, she said. Patient and strong are different things. I was being patient in a situation that required strength. I kept waiting for it to get better when what I needed to do was make a decision. Miles made a note. She said, that changes now. He looked up. That changes now, she said again. Firmer this time. Validation whisper. She said it quietly, but she meant every word. I knew. I think I always knew. And I let myself not know because knowing meant everything I had built meant something different than I thought. I deserved better than that. Elliot deserved better. And the 4 children I'm about to bring into this world, they deserve better too. Miles put his pen down. Then we build the case, he said. We build the case, she agreed. He pulled out a fresh legal pad, wrote the date at the top. Tell me everything, he said, from the beginning, so she did. She talked for 2 hours, about the DP text, about the Christmas party, about the late nights and the Tokyo calls that sometimes came at 2 in the afternoon her time, which was wrong for the time zone, which she had noticed and filed away and never confronted, about the way Garrett had started using a different tone with her. Not cruel, never cruel, just formal, as if she were a colleague he was managing rather than a wife he was loving. About the morning she had found a receipt, a hotel, not a hotel she recognized, not a hotel Whitfield Technologies used for clients, a small boutique hotel in the West Village. A Sunday afternoon 3 months ago. She had never asked him about it. She asked herself now, why didn't you ask? Because I was afraid of the answer. And because part of me was already preparing. Part of me knew this moment was coming and was quietly getting ready. Miles was a careful man. He asked careful questions. He took careful notes. And at the end of 2 hours he said, I want to be honest with you about something. Please, she said. Garrett's legal team is very good. They will try to make this fast and clean. The $80 million is designed to feel like so much money that you won't think clearly about what you're giving up. I know. But here's what they don't know. He looked at her. They don't know about the 4 children. They don't know that you have your own attorney who has been preparing for 8 months. And they don't know, he said, that you are not going to be managed. She said, no, I am not. She picked up the cold mug of tea. She drank it anyway. It was bitter. That was fine. She had learned to function in bitterness. It was just a flavor. It didn't have to define the meal. Breathing room scene. That night she lay in the guest room of her mother's house. The ceiling was the same ceiling she had looked at as a teenager. Same crack near the light fixture. Same shadow from the oak tree outside the window. She did what she had been doing for 3 days. She took every memory and looked for the lie inside it. Their honeymoon in Capri. The warmth of his hand on her back. The Mediterranean light on his face. Was it real? Their first apartment before the money got serious. Eating takeout on the floor because the furniture hadn't come yet. Laughing about something she couldn't even remember now. His laugh in that small room. Was it real? The morning she told him she was pregnant the first time. The way his face had changed. Something opening in it. Something that looked she had been so certain like joy. Was any of it real? She decided this. Some of it was. People are not entirely false. If they were, betrayal would be simpler. You can only be truly betrayed by someone who first gave you real reasons to trust. Garrett had given her real reasons. He had also lied. Both of those things were true at the same time. And holding both truths, not letting one cancel the other, that was the hard work of this season, cried then. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just the quiet kind of crying. The kind where your face goes still, and your chest heaves in slow waves, and you press your hand over your mouth so your mother doesn't hear through the wall. She cried for the marriage she had thought she had. Not for Garrett, for the marriage. For the version of her life she had believed in. Then she stopped. She breathed. She put her hand on her belly. 4 heartbeats. In there, steady, she had work to do. She called him from her mother's kitchen. 3 days after Miles's office. The plans were in place. Miles had reviewed everything. She knew exactly what she was doing. Sylvia was in the next room with the volume on the TV turned down low. Pretending to watch a cooking show, Caroline sat at the yellow table, dialed. Garrett picked up on the second ring. "I hoped you'd call," he said. His voice was smooth, measured, the voice of a man who had already decided the outcome and was simply waiting for reality to catch up. She said, "I'll accept the settlement." A pause. Brief. The exhale of a man who had braced for resistance and found none. "Good," he said. "I think this is the right decision for everyone." Everyone. She heard that word. She filed it. She said, "I have one condition." His voice shifted. Just slightly. Not concern. More like mild annoyance at a minor complication. "What condition?" he asked. "The Vermont house," she said. "Not money in lieu of it. Not the penthouse. The Vermont property itself, in my name." A longer pause. The Vermont house was worth perhaps $4 million. Not the largest asset. Not the flashiest. But she had spent the past 3 days doing her research. Because the Vermont house had been purchased, originally in her name, a gift from her family trust before the marriage. Garrett's attorneys had folded it into the marital estate during an asset restructuring 2 years ago. A quiet move that Garrett had probably forgotten about entirely. She had not forgotten. He said, "Fine, Vermont is fine. Have Miles send the paperwork." She said, "Already sent." Another pause. Longer this time. I said, "Yes, Garrett," she said. "I didn't say I wasn't prepared." He didn't respond to that. She said, "One more thing." "What?" he said, flat. "Not a question anymore. I'm healthy. The baby is healthy. I thought you should know." She hung up. Sylvia walked in from the next room. She didn't pretend anymore. She sat down across from Caroline. Put a fresh cup of coffee on the table between them. "You didn't tell him," she said. "No." "Good girl, Mom. I mean it." Sylvia wrapped both hands around her own cup. She was a tall woman with silver hair she'd stopped fighting years ago. The kind of face that had survived things. "That man sent a check to your doctor's office while you were sitting there waiting to hear your baby's heartbeats. He sent a check. Like you were an invoice." Caroline looked at her coffee. "I know," she said. "You don't negotiate with someone like that from a position of need. You wait. You prepare. You let him think he's won." Sylvia took a sip. "Then you show him what winning actually looks like." Caroline almost smiled. "You sound like Miles," she said. "Miles is a smart man," Sylvia said. "I've always said so." Layer 3 memory flooding. The papers were signed 10 days later. Caroline moved to the Vermont house with Elliot, 3 years old, brown-haired, bossy, in the way of people who have been loved completely and know it. He had her eyes. Sometimes when he looked at her with that direct gaze, she could forget everything complicated about the world for a full 30 seconds. The Vermont house was white clapboard with a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. There were oak trees in the yard, a garden that had gone a little wild. Inside, 5 bedrooms, a kitchen with wide windows, wood floors that creaked in the places you learned to love. It was hers, fully legally, completely hers. She walked through it the first evening while Elliot slept. Room by room, running her hand along the wall in the hallway, looking out the window at the tree line turning gold in the last of the October light. She had her mother's voice in her head. "Let him think he's won." She had her own voice too, the one that had been getting louder lately. "You are not what he decided you were. You never were." Memory flooding begins. She found herself in the smallest bedroom, the one that faced east. She stood there in the dark, and the memories came whether she wanted them or not. The day she had turned down a partnership offer, a small but promising architecture firm. She had been 28. Garrett had just been offered the CEO position at his father's company. He needed to move to New York immediately. She had told the firm she couldn't accept. She had told herself it was temporary, that her career would wait, that good things were worth sacrifice. She thought about that version of herself, 28 years old, standing in this same belief that love was supposed to outlast inconvenience. She had given up a career. She had moved 3 cities. She had made his dinners and attended his events and smiled at his clients and learned the names of their wives and remembered their children's birthdays and done all the invisible labor that made a powerful man look even more powerful. And he had handed her a check at a doctor's office. The anger that rose in her then was not hot. It was cold, precise. Mirror technique chapter 3. She went to the kitchen. She opened every cabinet. She reorganized them. All of them. Every dish, every glass, every pot. She worked for 2 hours in near silence, the house dark around her except for the kitchen light. She didn't think about why she was doing it. She just did it. Renata had once said, "You always reorganize things when you can't reorganize the actual problem." She was not wrong. At 1 in the morning, Caroline stood back and looked at her kitchen cabinets, perfectly ordered. Everything in its logical place. She could not order Garrett's choices. She could not order the last 4 years. She could not reorganize the fact that she had missed things and stayed too long and trusted too completely. But this kitchen, this house, this life going forward, those she could build right. Major twist chapter 3 6 days after she arrived in Vermont, she went into labor. She had known it was coming. She had the hospital bag. She had Sylvia driving up from Connecticut. She had a plan. What she had not fully prepared for, not emotionally, not viscerally, was the experience of delivering 4 children in a span of 3 hours. James Oliver came first, then Margaret Rose, then Charlotte Ann, then Daniel Reeve, named for her grandfather, a man who had never once in his life made her feel like less. 4. She held them one by one. The nurses moved efficiently around her. Sylvia sat in the corner with her hand over her mouth and tears running straight down her face without any sound, which was the most Sylvia thing possible. And Caroline, exhausted, shaking slightly, the physically depleted she had ever been in her life, looked at 4 small faces in turn. She thought, he paid me to disappear. He thinks I took his money and vanished. He has no idea these 4 people exist. She said very quietly, to no one in all of them, he has no idea. Sylvia heard. She came to the bedside. She took Caroline's hand. She said, no, he doesn't. Good. When does he find out? Caroline closed her eyes, held the smallest one a little tighter. She said, when I'm ready. Vermont. 18 months later. The house was never quiet anymore. Elliot was 4.5. He narrated everything he did. Everything. He provided ongoing commentary on breakfast, on the weather, on the behavior of birds outside the window, on the relative merits of his toy vehicles. He was exhausting and extraordinary. The 4 younger ones, James, Margaret, Charlotte, Daniel, were 18 months old. They had entered the phase where everything was either fascinating or catastrophic with no middle ground. A fallen block was a tragedy. A discovered spoon was a miracle. Caroline ran on approximately 5 hours of sleep and sheer determination. She had 2 part-time nannies. She had a housekeeper 3 days a week. She paid for all of it from the settlement, invested carefully with a financial advisor she had chosen herself after interviewing 4. She was not reckless with the money. She was also not finished. Because in the converted sunroom at the back of the house, the one with the south-facing windows and the wide plank floors, she was building something. Whitfield was her legal name still, for now, for the children's sake. But the firm she was building had her mother's name. Crane Sustainable Architecture. 3 employees, including herself. Projects focused on rural communities. Sustainable builds. The kind of work that mattered without needing a Manhattan address to prove it. It was small. It was hers. And small things that are entirely yours feel larger than large things that belong to someone else. Layer 4, anger rising. She was on a supplier call when Elliot came into the sunroom holding a drawing. He waited. Patient in the way of children who have been taught that patience gets better results than interrupting. She finished the call. She looked at him. He held out the drawing. I made Daddy, he said. She took it, a tall figure, stick arms, no mouth, just eyes, large empty circles. She said, it's very good, baby. She hung it on the refrigerator. She helped Elliot get a snack. She listened to his 17 opinions about the relative crunchiness of different crackers. She said the right things. Later, after he was in bed, she took the drawing down. She sat at the kitchen table. She looked at the figure with no mouth, the tall man with empty circle eyes and no way to speak. She thought that's actually quite accurate. She put it in the recycling bin. Then she took it back out. She wasn't sure why. She put it in the drawer by the phone. He has a son who draws him, a son who thinks about him, a son who gave him a face, and the face he gave him has no mouth. She was angry. She had been pushing the anger down because there were 5 children who needed her present and functional. She had been filing it away in a place she didn't visit. But the drawing opened the file. She was angry at what had been taken. Not the money. Not even the marriage. But the straightforward version of her life she had been entitled to. The one where her children had a father who showed up. The one where she hadn't had to become a legal strategist and a sole financial provider and an architectural entrepreneur all at once. From a farmhouse in Vermont, running on 5 hours of sleep. She was angry at the efficiency of his exit. He had handed her a check and walked away and restructured his life around Dana Pruitt and never once, not once, asked about the children he had left behind. Mirror Technique Chapter 4. 2 weeks later, the Google alert came through. She had set up alerts on Garrett's name, Miles' suggestion. Know what's happening before it happens to you. She was making coffee. 6:45 in the morning. The house was still quiet. The brief, precious window before the children woke up. The alert buzzed. She read it on her phone, standing at the counter. Whitfield Tech CEO announces engagement to executive Dana Pruitt. Couple expecting second set of twins. She read it twice. Second set. So Dana was pregnant again. 4 of Garrett's biological children lived in a Vermont farmhouse, and he was announcing an engagement. She set the phone face down on the counter. She stood at the sink. She ran cold water over her wrists. Not for any dramatic reason. She just needed to feel something grounded. Something real. The cold water was real. She stood there for a moment. Then she picked up the phone. She called Miles. He picked up immediately. "I saw it," he said. "He's going to want a clean slate," she said. "He's going to want to legally formalize his life with Dana, and he's going to want nothing from the past attached to it." "That's likely, yes." "He's going to file something. To terminate rights. To make the children disappear on paper the way he made me disappear." Pause. "Caroline," Miles said carefully, "if he files, everything comes to light. The 4 children. The actual settlement. All of it." She said, "I know. Are you ready for that?" She looked out the kitchen window. The Vermont morning was gray and still. The oak trees were bare. A bird sat on the fence post by the garden, very still, as if deciding something. She said, "I've been ready for this since the day I signed those papers." Validation whispered chapter 4. She said it quietly, standing at her kitchen window with cold water still wet on her wrists. "I am not invisible. My children are not invisible. And the truth is coming whether he is ready for it or not." She picked up her mug. She drank her coffee. Then she went to wake up her children. Miles called her on a Thursday afternoon. The 4 younger ones were napping. Elliot was in the playroom. The house was in its brief midday suspension. Miles said, "It's time to talk about the envelope." She had given him the envelope 8 months after the births. An envelope she had prepared after her appointment with Dr. Paul Sutton. Sealed. Specific instructions. Open only if Garrett ever made a legal move regarding the children. Miles said Garrett had retained a family law firm in New York. The filing was imminent. She said, "Open it." She heard him break the seal. She heard the paper unfolding. He read. The contents were a genetic screening report, done at 12 weeks during her pregnancy. Standard testing, chromosomal analysis, paternal confirmation. She had requested it privately, from a lab not connected to her regular OBGYN practice. The report confirmed Garrett's the father of all 4 children. But there was a note at the bottom. A note from Dr. Sutton, the genetic specialist she had consulted separately after the lab flagged an anomaly. Miles read it slowly. Patient should be aware. The genetic pattern present across all 4 siblings contains a statistical anomaly inconsistent with standard fraternal twin pairing from a single paternal contributor. There is a possibility consistent with heteropaternal superfecundation, a documented phenomenon in which 2 eggs released in the same ovulatory cycle are fertilized by different partners. Formal individual paternity testing is recommended. Miles stopped reading. The silence on the phone was the specific silence of a careful man choosing his next words very carefully. Caroline said, "Keep going." He said, "Is there more?" She said, "Not in that document. In the other one behind it." She heard him reach into the envelope again. Second document was a private DNA paternity test. Completed forms after the births. Ordered by Caroline herself. Processed through a certified lab in Boston. Miles read it. He was quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "Caroline." She said, "I know." "One of the 4 Daniels," she said. "Yes." "Daniel's results indicate a different paternal contributor." "Yes." He let that sit. She had been sitting with it for over a year. She could hold it now without falling. But in the beginning, the first time Dr. Sutton had explained what the anomaly might mean, she had sat in his office and looked at the plant in the corner and thought, how is that possible? How is any of this possible? She had thought about the night in Portland, a work conference. 14 months before the divorce, a colleague she had known for years, kind, decent, married. A dinner. Too much wine. A terrible decision made by a woman who was already losing her marriage and had not yet been allowed to say it out loud. One night. She had told no one. She had carried it the way you carry a mistake that happened inside a broken situation, not with pride, not with shame exactly, but with the weight of something real that you must account for honestly. Layer 4 anger at full force. Now Miles said, "This changes the legal landscape." She said, "How?" "Garrett is preparing to file for termination of parental rights on the grounds that he has reason to doubt paternity. He obtained a partial DNA test through means his attorneys won't disclose, likely a sample from Elliot, without your consent during a visit. The results were inconclusive. He tested Elliot? The test was partial. Inconclusive. But he's using it to justify the filing." She sat down on the edge of the kitchen counter. She needed something solid. She said, "He's going to use the question of paternity to walk away from all 4. That's his strategy. He's going to paint me as the unfaithful one, so that any doubt about the children lands on my character, not his." "Yes, he left," she said. Her voice was steady. "He left and he paid me to leave, and he has never contacted these children once. And now he wants to use the possibility of doubt to make himself the victim of the story." Miles said nothing. He was letting her process. She said, "And Daniel." "Daniel is the complication." "Daniel is not a complication," she said. Daniel is my son. Of course. But legally, I know what legally means, she said. I know what it means. And I know what it means to stand in a courtroom and have my choices picked apart. I know what's coming. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the truth is complicated. I know that. My night in Portland that happened. I take responsibility for it. But here is what else is true. Garrett was already gone when that happened. He had already chosen Dana. He had already decided this marriage was over. He just hadn't told me yet. She said, he doesn't get to use my honest mistake to erase 4 children. Not when his choices created the situation that led to mine. Mirror Technique Chapter 5 that night. 3 in the morning. Kitchen floor. She didn't remember sitting down. She was just there. Back against the cabinet. The tile cold through her pajamas. The baby monitor on the counter above her. Its green light steady. She did the inventory, the thing she did when the world got too large. What was true? 1, she loved all 5 of her children completely and without condition. That was not complicated. 2, 4 of her children were biologically Garrett's. 3, 1 was not. 4, she had been faithful to Garrett for the vast majority of their marriage. 5, there had been one night. One terrible, human, understandable, inexcusable night. 6, she had carried the weight of that honestly. 7, Garrett had never once asked how his children were. She sat on the cold floor and held those 7 things. Then she got up, made tea, went back to bed. Tomorrow was going to require her to be functional. So she was going to be functional. Garrett filed on a Monday. The petition arrived at Miles's office by courier at 9 in the morning. Petition for termination of parental rights. Garrett Allen Whitfield, petitioner, citing disputed paternity, citing the inconclusive private DNA test, citing, and this was the part that made Miles call her, immediately citing documented evidence of extramarital conduct by the respondent during the marriage. Documented evidence. Someone had talked. She didn't know who. She didn't know how. But someone in Portland had talked, or someone had hired someone to find out what there was to find. It didn't matter how. It was out. Miles said, we need to get ahead of this. She said, how long do we have? Hours, maybe, then let's use them. They didn't get ahead of it. By noon, it was on 2 financial news sites and 1 celebrity gossip platform. By 3, it was everywhere. The headline on the gossip site read, Whitfield tech billionaire in paternity dispute with ex-wife. Sources claim DNA tests inconclusive. Ex-wife alleged to have had affair. The comment section was not kind. She read none of it. What she could not avoid, the preschool. She had committed to Elliot's class presentation 2 weeks ago. A parent show and tell. Elliot had been talking about it every day since. He had chosen to bring his collection of painted rocks. He was very serious about this. She put on her coat. She drove to the school. She walked into the classroom. Every head turned. Not dramatically, just a slight shift. The awareness moving through the room like a current. She smiled. She sat in the small plastic chair in the back. She watched Elliot explain each painted rock with complete earnestness. He explained the rock shaped like a duck. He explained the rock that was just a rock but had a good color. He explained the system by which he had organized them. She laughed in the right places. She clapped at the end. She said goodbye to the teacher with warmth she genuinely felt. She drove home. She pulled into the garage. She turned off the engine. Mirror Technique Chapter 6. She sat in the garage for 19 minutes. She counted later. The garage was dark except for the light from the dash. She could hear, very faintly, the sound of the nannies inside with the children. Life continuing in there. 5 small people being fed and changed and kept alive and warm. She couldn't make herself go in yet. Not because she didn't want to, because she needed 19 minutes of not being needed, of not having to be fully assembled, of just being a person sitting in a car in a dark garage with a complicated life. She allowed herself those 19 minutes. Then she went inside. She hung up her coat. She washed her hands at the kitchen sink. She looked out the window at the backyard. Validation whisper. Chapter 6, she said it quietly, out loud, to the window. I am not what he is saying I am, and I do not need his version of me to keep standing. She turned from the window. She started dinner. Layer 5, deep vulnerability arriving. The real collapse came 4 days later. It came on a Tuesday afternoon in November. All 5 children were napping. The house was the kind of still that only exists for about 40 minutes on a good day. A number she didn't recognize called her cell. She answered. A man's voice. Efficient. A journalist, he said, a financial reporter who also wrote the occasional profile piece. He said, Ms. Whitfield, can you comment on your ex-husband's claim that you were involved with a third party during the marriage? She hung up. She sat down on the stairs. The stairs were carpeted, beige. She stared at the pattern in the carpet. The thought that came was not dramatic. It was quiet and flat and honest. Is this my fault? And then some of it is. And then how much? And then does it matter how much? Does the amount change anything? Does it change what Garrett did? Does it change the check? Does it change the 4 children he has never met? She sat on the stairs for a long time. The baby monitor on the landing crackled. Margaret was stirring. I have to. She stood up. She went to get her daughter. Breathing room scene post-collapse that night. After everyone was asleep, she went to the sunroom, her studio. She didn't turn on the main light, just the small lamp in the corner, the warm circle of it falling on the drafting table. She moved her current project aside, unrolled a fresh sheet of paper. She didn't draw a building. She just drew lines, curves, forms that didn't mean anything and didn't need to. The way she had drawn as a student before architecture had rules and deadlines and clients. Just the pencil on the paper, the sound of it, the smell of the paper. She drew for 2 hours. When she stopped, she looked at what she had made. She couldn't tell you what it was. It didn't matter. What mattered was that for 2 hours, her hands had been moving, and her mind had been quiet, and she had been inside herself rather than inside the thing that was happening to her. She rolled up the paper. She went to bed. Dana Pruitt called on a Thursday morning. The caller ID showed a New York area code, a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. She answered. "I know you have no reason to talk to me." Caroline recognized the voice immediately. Smooth, polished, but something underneath it now that hadn't been there at the Christmas party. Exhaustion. The particular exhaustion of a woman who has recently understood something she doesn't want to know. Caroline said, "Correct. I know what I did." "Yes. I'm not calling to apologize. I don't think an apology is what you need from me." "Then what are you calling for?" "A pause. The kind of pause that precedes something important." Dana said, "He's doing the same thing to me." The kitchen went quiet. Dana continued. Her voice was steady, but she was holding it that way deliberately. You could hear the effort. She described the prenuptial agreement his attorneys had presented her. 12 pages, drafted by 3 different lawyers, restrictive in ways she hadn't fully understood at first. When she'd had her own attorney review it, which she had done after Garrett suggested she didn't need one, which was itself information, the attorney had turned pale. The agreement effectively stripped her of any financial claim independent of Garrett's controlled disbursements, including, critically, any independent custody claim to the twins she had already delivered. "He wants to keep the children," Dana said. "He's already moved his mother in. He's building a record. He's documenting every time I'm tired or overwhelmed or run late. He's building a case to take them." Caroline sat down. She didn't feel sympathy. That would have been too simple and too false. What she felt was recognition. The specific recognition of a woman who has just understood something another woman understood before her. She said, "What do you want from me?" Dana said, "I have evidence about the original settlement, about the timeline of decisions he made, about when he decided to end the marriage and how he orchestrated the announcement of my pregnancy to maximize his leverage. You'd testify to that?" "Yes." "Why?" Dana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because I have 2 children, and I don't want them raised by a man who treats their mother like a clause in a contract." Caroline said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "I'll have Miles contact your attorney." "Thank you." Dana, "Yes? You understand that this doesn't make us friends." "I know. And it doesn't make what happened between you and Garrett acceptable." "I know that too." A long pause. Caroline said, "But I understand why you're doing this, and I think your children will be better for it." She hung up. She sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. Mirror Technique Chapter 7. She went to check on the babies. All 4 of the youngest were still down. She went to Elliot's room. He was awake, lying on his back, looking at the ceiling with the focused expression he had when he was thinking about something important. He said, "Mama?" "Yeah, babe." "Is Daddy ever going to come see us?" She sat on the edge of his bed. She had known this question was coming. She had been preparing for it the way you prepare for a difficult conversation, not with a script, but with honesty, held in advance. She said, "I don't know, baby, but I know that we are going to be okay." He thought about this with the seriousness of a 4.5-year-old considering something real. "Do you promise?" he asked. She said, "I promise." She meant it. She meant it completely. It was not a thing she said to make him feel better. It was a thing she knew. She smoothed his hair. He closed his eyes. She sat there until his breathing slowed. Validation Whisper Chapter 7. She said it softly in the hallway after she left his room. "We are going to be okay, all of us. Every single one of us." Then she called Miles. She told him about Dana. He was quiet for a long moment after she finished. Then he said, "This changes everything, Caroline. I know. If she testifies, it establishes a pattern. A deliberate pattern of using legal and financial mechanisms to control and discard the women in his life. The judge won't just be looking at paternity. She'll be looking at a man who has tried to erase two different families. Yes. And the DNA results. We need Dr. Sutton, she said, schedule him. Are you sure? Everything comes out, Caroline, everything. She thought about Elliot on his back looking at the ceiling. She thought about four small faces in a hospital room. She thought about a drawing with no mouth. She said, schedule him. Dr. Paul Sutton's office. A plant in the corner that was genuinely thriving. Beige walls. Framed degrees. The kind of room designed to hold difficult news without amplifying it. Miles sat beside her. Dana's attorney sat to one side, observing. A neutral third-party witness, agreed upon by both legal teams. Dr. Sutton placed a folder on the table. He said, I'll go through this carefully. Stop me at any point. He opened it. Elliot. Paternal confirmation, Garrett Whitfield. Confirmed. James Oliver. Paternal confirmation, Garrett Whitfield. Confirmed. Margaret Rose. Paternal confirmation, Garrett Whitfield. Confirmed. Charlotte Ann. Paternal confirmation, Garrett Whitfield. Confirmed. He paused. He turned to the final section. Daniel Reeve. He said Daniel's results confirm a different paternal contributor. The chromosomal markers are inconsistent with Mr. Whitfield's genetic profile. Caroline nodded. She had known for over a year. The knowing was not new. But hearing it said in this room by this man, with Miles beside her and a neutral witness present that made it real in a new and permanent way, she said, and the alternate contributor? The comparative test you submitted the secondary sample from the individual in Portland confirms paternal match for Daniel. She looked at the table. 4 of her 5 children were Garrett's. 1 was not. The man from Portland was a decent person. She had called him, had that conversation, the most uncomfortable conversation of her life, and he had listened and he had been shocked, and then he had been, to his credit, decent. He was married, he had a family, he had agreed to the testing. Agreed that Daniel would know the truth when Daniel was old enough to want it. Agreed to be whatever Daniel eventually needed him to be. That conversation was done. It was handled. It was behind her. Miles said, Dr. Sutton, in Vermont family law, the presumption of paternity applies to all children born during a marriage unless successfully contested in court. That's my understanding, yes. And Garrett Whitfield has filed to contest. So the full results will be presented to the court, yes. Which means Miles said that the judge will see 4 confirmed biological children of the petitioner. 4 children the petitioner has never met, never supported, and has attempted to legally disclaim. Dr. Sutton said that is what the results show. Layer 6, quiet strength. Caroline looked at the folder. She said, Dr. Sutton, when you work with families who go through this kind of testing, the ones who come out the other side intact, what do they have in common? He considered the question carefully. He said the parents who do best are the ones who decide early that identity isn't only biology. Identity is also who shows up, who stays, who loves without condition. He closed the folder. 4 of your children have a biological father who used legal mechanisms to try to make them disappear. 1 has a biological father who didn't know he existed until recently. In both cases, the parent who has been present, who drove to every appointment, sat on the floor at 3 in the morning, built a career, fought a legal battle is you. He paused. They already know who their parent is, Miss Whitfield. They've known since day 1, Mirror Technique Chapter 8. She pressed her hand flat on the table, the way she pressed her hand against the kitchen counter when she needed something solid. She left it there for a moment. Then she said, thank you. She meant it for more than the genetics. Outside on the street, Miles walked beside her in the cold afternoon air. She said, are we ready? He said, we're ready. Is it going to be ugly? Parts of it. But we're ready, we are. She looked up at the sky, clear, cold, the particular blue of a Vermont November afternoon, even here in the city. She thought, I built a firm from a sunroom. I raised 5 children almost entirely alone. I sat on a kitchen floor in the dark and got back up. I have been prepared for ugly for a long time, she said. Then let's go. The hearing lasted 4 days. She would not remember all of it. She would remember specific moments the way you remember certain weather, not the whole season, but particular days that changed something. Day 1. Garrett's attorney was polished, confident, the voice of a man whose clients could afford the best and who had been the best long enough to believe it was permanent. He argued that Caroline had been unfaithful during the marriage, that the $80 million settlement was made in good faith, that Garrett had legitimate reason to question paternity and was exercising a legal right. Garrett sat at his table. She saw him clearly for the first time in nearly 4 years. He was the same. The suit. The jaw set at its usual angle, the controlled posture of a man who has never had to be afraid of a room. He glanced at her. Once. She looked back. She did not look away first. Day 2. Dana Pruitt took the stand. She was composed, precise. Her attorney had prepared her well, and she had prepared herself better. She had the specific composure of someone who has decided what they are going to say and will not be moved from it. She testified about the timeline. Garrett had decided to end the marriage, she said before she announced her pregnancy. The decision came first. The announcement came after. He had used the announcement as cover as a reason that made him look like a man responding to circumstances rather than a man who had already chosen. She testified about the settlement delivery, that she had been instructed to coordinate the courier, that she had been told to time it to Caroline's appointment. Garrett's attorney objected 14 times during Dana's testimony. 12 objections were overruled. Day 3. Dr. Paul Sutton took the stand. He explained heteropaternal superfecundation to the court in the careful, clear way he had explained it to Caroline. He cited the medical literature. He answered questions with measured precision. When Garrett's attorney tried to emphasize tried to make Daniel the central issue, the evidence of infidelity, the reason to dismiss everything else, Miles stood up. He said, Dr. Sutton, of the 5 children born to Caroline Whitfield during the marriage, how many are confirmed biological children of Garrett Whitfield? Dr. Sutton said, 4. 4 children. Yes. Who were alive and living in Vermont when Mr. Whitfield filed to terminate parental rights? Yes. 4 children he has never met, never financially supported beyond the negotiated lump sum, and actively attempted to disclaim through this legal proceeding. That is consistent with the timeline presented. The room was quiet, not dramatically quiet, not the quiet of a movie courtroom, the quiet of a real room in which real truth has just arrived and everyone is feeling the weight of it. Justice variation, the truth when Caroline watched Garrett's face. She had expected to feel triumph. She had prepared herself for triumph because she thought that was what justice would feel like from the inside. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like clarity, a calm, final, bone-deep clarity. The kind that comes when you have been carrying a complicated truth for a very long time and finally put it down in a room where other people can see it too. She felt clear. Mirror Technique Chapter 9. During a recess on day 3, she was in the courthouse bathroom, washing her hands, looking at herself in the mirror. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been in a legal proceeding for 3 days and before that had been fighting a longer battle for years. She also looked like herself, more like herself actually than she had in a long time. She had worn a dress Renata had picked, a particular shade of blue, not Garrett's blue, hers. She looked at the mirror and thought, who is this person? Not with uncertainty, with genuine curiosity. Because the person in the mirror was not who she had been in that waiting room, not who she had been in Garrett's orbit, not who she had been when she had believed that patient and strong were the same thing. This person was something else, she said quietly to the mirror. Okay, let's finish it. She dried her hands. She walked back in. Day 4. The judge was a woman in her late 50s, the manner of someone who had heard every version of this story and could no longer be surprised by any of them, but still felt the weight of each one. She ruled from the bench. She said in part, the court finds that the petitioner's motion to terminate parental rights is not only unsupported by the full evidentiary record, but represents a troubling and documented pattern of using financial and legal resources to avoid the responsibilities of parenthood. She paused. 4 children, confirmed biological children of the petitioner, children who have been alive for over 2 years, children who live in Vermont, and who, by the petitioner's own admission, he has never attempted to contact or support, beyond an initial lump sum that this court finds was negotiated under materially incomplete disclosure. She looked at Garrett. The original settlement agreement is hereby set aside in full. Child support obligations will be recalculated based on the petitioner's documented income and assessed for all 4 biological children from the date of their birth. Arrears will be calculated accordingly. She set down her papers. She said, "You cannot pay your way out of fatherhood, Mr. Whitfield." Validation whisper Chapter 9 outside. The courthouse steps. November cold, her breath making small clouds. Miles stood beside her. He said the new figure. The monthly child support. The arrears. The total value over the years of each child's minority. The number was substantially more than $80 million. She stood on the steps and looked at the city. She thought about the waiting room, the cream envelope, the check she had counted the commas on. She thought about what he had believed he was buying. Her disappearance, her compliance, her silence. She said out loud he severely underestimated the cost of quiet. Renata, who had been waiting at the bottom of the steps with her coat open despite the cold, because Renata was constitutionally unable to feel appropriately cold, said, "That is going on a coffee mug. I will personally have that printed tonight." For the first time in a very long time, Caroline laughed, a real laugh, the kind that reached her eyes. 18 months later, Vermont in late spring, the house had a new porch. She had designed it herself. The garden that had gone wild was tamed now, not formally, not stiffly, but in the way of something that has been given attention and responded to it. The sunroom had been expanded into a proper studio, a real drafting table, natural light from three sides, a small conference table where she met with clients when they came to her rather than her going to them, which happened more often now. Crane Sustainable Architecture, 5 full-time employees, 3 completed projects, a community center in New Hampshire, a family housing cluster in upstate New York, and a school, a small one, 2 towns over from the farmhouse that would be finished in the fall. She was 36 years old. She felt, for the first time she could clearly name, like herself. Layer 7 transformed power. Garrett complied with the court order. Not warmly, not with any visible remorse, but he complied. Payments arrived on schedule. His attorneys communicated with Miles on the technical matters. He had not come to Vermont. She had made a decision early. She would not prevent him from having a relationship with the 4 children if he chose to pursue it. She would not facilitate it either. If and when he decided to appear in their lives, that would be addressed when it happened. He had not yet decided. Elliot had stopped asking about Daddy. She didn't know whether to be relieved or sad about that. Some days it felt like wisdom. Some days it felt like a loss. She had started seeing a therapist. Not because she was falling apart, she was not falling apart, but because she had spent 4 years being very strong and very alone, and she had decided that strong and alone did not need to be permanent companions. The therapist was a quiet woman in Burlington who had a plant very similar to Dr. Sutton's. Caroline had commented on it once. The therapist had smiled and said, "People need living things around them when they're doing hard work." The question of Daniel, she had told the therapist about Daniel, about Portland, about the weight of carrying it, and then the different weight of it being known. The therapist had said, "How do you feel about it now?" She had thought honestly. She had said, "I feel like I handled it as well as a person could handle something they handled poorly to begin with." The therapist had nodded. "That's a generous and accurate self-assessment. I made a mistake in a broken situation. I didn't make it in a healthy one. That doesn't excuse it, but it contextualizes it. Yes, and Daniel is Daniel. He is mine. He is wonderful. Whatever the biology says, I am his parent. That is not complicated." "No," the therapist had said. "That part is actually very simple." Closure spectrum secondary ending. Renata came for a long weekend in May. They sat on the new porch after the children were in bed. Wine glasses. The tree line going from dark green to almost black as the sky changed. Crickets just beginning to test the air. Renata said, "Do you miss him?" Caroline considered this honestly. She owed herself honesty. "I miss who I thought he was," she said. "The version I built from hope and early mornings and a good proposal story. I miss that person. But that person may have never existed. And the real him, no." She said it simply, "Not at all. Not a single bit." Renata said, "You think he knows what he lost?" She looked at the tree line. "I think he's starting to understand the arithmetic of it," she said. "And I think that's between him and whoever he becomes." Renata looked at her. "You're very evolved." "I'm very tired," Caroline said. Evolved and tired looked the same from the outside. Renata laughed. The sound went up into the Vermont evening, warm and completely hers. Wisdom moment, universal resonance later. After Renata was asleep, Caroline sat alone on the porch. The porch she had designed, the house she had won, the life she had built in the space his exit had created. She was thinking about the woman in the waiting room, 8 months pregnant, holding a cream envelope, counting the commas on a check, feeling the number and trying to decide what it meant about her worth. She thought about what she would say to that woman. Not much, actually. She had learned not to trust the advice of people who stood safely on the other side of hard things and called back instructions. You couldn't know what a thing required until you were inside it. That woman had been doing the best she could with what she had. She didn't need different advice. She needed time. But if she had to say one thing, if that woman had somehow been able to hear her across all those months, she would say, "You are not the amount he paid you to leave. You are not the story he told about you to justify leaving. You are not his version of you. You are what you build after you go." And then she would say, "Go," and then build. Tertiary ending minute 100. Her future glimpsed. The next morning, early, before the children woke up, she was in the studio, coffee going cold on the corner of the drafting table. The morning light coming through the south-facing windows at the angle that made the room feel like it was made of something other than wood and glass. A new project on the board, 12 families, a rural Vermont community, sustainable construction, a common space with a garden in the center, small walking paths connecting the houses. The kind of design that said, "You are not alone, and here is what that looks like in wood and glass and light." The firm wasn't ready for this a year ago. She was ready now. She picked up her pencil, she drew the first line. The line was clean and certain, no hesitation in it. Just a pencil moving across the paper with the confidence of someone who knows what they're doing and is no longer surprised by that fact. Outside through the studio windows, the light was doing that thing it did in Vermont in late spring, pale and precise, with a warmth coming into it, the kind of morning light that looks like the beginning of something. The monitor crackled. Margaret first, then James. Then the chain reaction, the small sounds of 5 children waking up into a day their mother had already started building. She put the pencil down. She went to get them. The project would be there when she got back. It always was. That was the thing about building something real, something that was entirely yours, laid out on paper in your own handwriting, in a room with your name on the door. It waited for you. However long you needed, it waited. And when you came back still tired, still human, still carrying the complicated weight of everything that had made you, it was right there, exactly where you left it, ready to continue.